An 8-year-old boy stood in front of his teacher with a BB pellet lodged in his neck, cigarette burns covering his skin, and a smile that had long since disappeared from his face. When she asked what happened, he whispered that he fell. She knew he was lying. Everyone knew he was lying. And yet, Gabriel Fernandez would be dead within months, tortured to death in a small apartment, while the very systems designed to protect him looked the other way. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe so you never miss stories like this. Gabriel Fernandez was born into a world that never wanted him. His mother, Pearl Fernandez, had given birth to him in 2005, but she never held him the way mothers are supposed to hold their children. There was no warmth in her eyes when she looked at him, no protective instinct that should have been hardwired into her brain. Instead, she handed him off to her parents, Michael and David Contreras, who raised Gabriel for the first 4 years of his life. During those years, Gabriel was a normal child. He laughed, he played, he was loved. But in 2009, Pearl decided she wanted Gabriel back. Not because maternal instinct had suddenly awakened inside her. Not because she missed her son. She wanted him back because she had discovered she could receive welfare benefits for having him in her care. Gabriel was worth money to her. That was the extent of his value in his mother's eyes. When Gabriel moved into Pearl's apartment in Palmdale, California, he entered what would become a chamber of systematic psychological and physical destruction. Pearl lived with her boyfriend, Isauro, a man whose capacity for cruelty would prove bottomless. Together, they would spend the next 4 years transforming a happy, healthy child into a broken shell of a human being. The torture began slowly, almost imperceptibly. A slap here. A cruel word there. But it escalated with terrifying speed. Gabriel was forced to eat cat litter. He was made to sleep in a small cabinet, locked inside for hours at a time, sometimes overnight. He was gagged with a sock and bound with rope. He was beaten with a belt buckle until his skin split open. He was shot with a BB gun for sport. He was forced to eat his own vomit. He was burned with cigarettes. He was pepper sprayed in the face for fun. Would you have noticed the signs if Gabriel had been in your child's class? Would you have said something? The psychological torture was perhaps even more devastating than the physical abuse. Pearl and Isauro told Gabriel repeatedly that he was gay, that he was worthless, that he was disgusting. They forced him to wear girls' clothing to school as a form of humiliation. They made him believe that he deserved everything that was happening to him. They broke his spirit long before they broke his body. Gabriel's siblings lived in the same apartment. They witnessed the abuse. They were sometimes forced to participate in it. Pearl would instruct them to hit Gabriel, to join in the torture sessions. Imagine being a child, watching your brother being destroyed, and being told that you must help destroy him. The psychological damage inflicted on those children is incalculable. They were victims too, trapped in a house of horrors with no escape. But here is where the story becomes even more disturbing. Gabriel's torture was not a secret. It was not hidden behind closed doors in some isolated location where no one could see. Gabriel went to school. He interacted with teachers, with administrators, with other students. His injuries were visible. His suffering was obvious, and people reported it. Between 2012 and 2013, the Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services received 8 separate reports of abuse concerning Gabriel Fernandez. 8 times, someone saw something wrong and made the decision to speak up. 8 times, the system was given an opportunity to save Gabriel's life. 8 times the system failed. Social workers visited the home. They saw Gabriel. They saw the conditions he was living in. They documented concerns. And then they closed the cases. They marked them as unfounded or inconclusive. They believed Pearl's explanations. They accepted her lies. They left Gabriel in that apartment and walked away. Do you think you would have believed Pearl if you had been the social worker? Would you have seen through her deception? Gabriel's teacher, Jennifer Garcia, became increasingly alarmed by what she was witnessing. Gabriel came to school with black eyes, with bruises covering his body, with marks around his neck. He was withdrawn. He flinched when adults approached him. He stopped participating in class. He stopped smiling. Garcia reported her concerns multiple times. She begged for someone to help Gabriel. She could see that he was dying, slowly and painfully, right in front of her eyes. Security guards at Gabriel's school also noticed the abuse. They saw him limping. They saw him struggling to walk. They saw the fear in his eyes. They reported it. Nothing happened. Gabriel's uncle, Christopher Contreras, tried to intervene. He called the abuse hotline. He told them that Gabriel was being tortured. He pleaded with them to remove Gabriel from the home. The social workers told him they had investigated and found nothing wrong. The system was not just failing Gabriel. The system was actively enabling his torture. Every time a report was dismissed, every time a case was closed, Pearl and Isauro received confirmation that they could continue what they were doing without consequence. They learned that no one was coming to save Gabriel. They learned that they were untouchable. The abuse intensified. Gabriel was forced to kneel on uncooked rice for hours, his knees bleeding and swollen. He was made to eat spoiled food. He was denied access to the bathroom and then punished when he soiled himself. He was kept awake for days at a time. He was subjected to cold baths that left him shivering and hypothermic. He was punched in the face so hard that his teeth were knocked loose. In the months before his death, Gabriel stopped going to school regularly. When he did attend, he could barely function. He was malnourished, weighing only 60 pounds. His body was covered in injuries in various stages of healing, a roadmap of sustained torture. His face was swollen and bruised. He walked with difficulty. He was by any reasonable standard a child in immediate danger of death, and still, no one saved him. On May 22, 2013, Pearl called 911. She told the dispatcher that Gabriel had fallen and hit his head. When paramedics arrived at the apartment, they found Gabriel unconscious, not breathing, with a cracked skull, broken ribs, and injuries covering his entire body. He had BB pellets embedded in his skin, he had burns, he had ligature marks. He looked like he had been in a severe car accident, except the accident had been ongoing for years. Gabriel was rushed to the hospital, but it was too late. He had suffered catastrophic brain damage. His body had endured more trauma than most people experience in a lifetime. He was declared brain dead and taken off life support 2 days later, on May 24, 2013. He was 8 years old. The autopsy revealed the full extent of Gabriel's suffering. He had been beaten so severely and so frequently that his body showed injuries in multiple stages of healing. Some were fresh. Some were weeks old. Some were months old. The medical examiner determined that Gabriel had been tortured over an extended period of time. His death was ruled a homicide. When investigators searched the apartment, they found the cabinet where Gabriel had been forced to sleep. It was small, barely large enough for a child to fit inside. There were no blankets, no pillow, no comfort of any kind. They found the BB gun that had been used to shoot him. They found evidence of the systematic abuse that had been inflicted on him day after day, month after month, year after year. Pearl and Isauro were arrested and charged with murder. During the investigation, the full scope of their cruelty emerged. They had not just abused Gabriel. They had enjoyed it. They had laughed while torturing him. They had taken pleasure in his pain. They had competed to see who could inflict more suffering. They had treated his torture as entertainment. Would you be able to sit in a courtroom and listen to the details of what they did? Could you maintain your composure? The trial revealed disturbing details about Pearl's psychology. She had a history of mental health issues and had been diagnosed with various personality disorders. But mental illness does not explain what she did to Gabriel. Plenty of people struggle with mental health and never torture their children to death. Pearl made choices. She chose cruelty. She chose violence. She chose to destroy her own child. Isauro Aguirre was even more disturbing. He had no biological connection to Gabriel, no reason to hate him beyond his own sadistic impulses. He targeted Gabriel specifically, singling him out from Pearl's other children for the worst abuse. He seemed to derive genuine pleasure from Gabriel's suffering. He was not mentally ill in any clinical sense. He was simply evil. The prosecution argued that Pearl and Isauro had tortured Gabriel to death over a period of months, subjecting him to abuse that escalated until his body could no longer survive it. The defense attempted to argue that Gabriel's death was accidental, that they had not intended to kill him. But the evidence was overwhelming. The pattern of abuse was clear. The intent was obvious. In 2018, Isauro Aguirre was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. Gabriel Fernandez pleaded guilty to first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They will both die behind bars, which is the only mercy they deserve. But the story does not end with their convictions. Because Gabriel's death was not just the result of two sadistic individuals. It was the result of systemic failure on a massive scale. 8 reports of abuse were made. 8 opportunities to save Gabriel's life were squandered. Social workers who were supposed to protect him instead protected his abusers. 4 social workers were charged with child abuse and falsifying records in connection with Gabriel's death. They were accused of lying in their reports, of failing to properly investigate the abuse allegations, of deliberately ignoring evidence of torture. The charges were eventually dismissed on appeal, but the damage to public trust was done. People saw clearly that the system designed to protect vulnerable children had failed in the most catastrophic way possible. The Los Angeles County Department of Children and Family Services was forced to confront its failures. Internal investigations revealed a culture of negligence, of overworked and undertrained staff, of cases being closed prematurely to meet quotas, of children being left in dangerous situations because removing them was too much paperwork. Gabriel was not the only child who fell through the cracks. He was simply the one whose death became impossible to ignore. In the aftermath of Gabriel's murder, California passed several laws aimed at reforming the child welfare system. The Gabriel Fernandez Act increased penalties for social workers who falsify records. Other legislation improved training for social workers and mandated more thorough investigations of abuse reports. But laws cannot undo what happened to Gabriel. They cannot bring him back. They can only attempt to prevent the next Gabriel from suffering the same fate. Do you believe the system has truly changed? Or are there other children right now, in this moment, being tortured while social workers close their cases and walk away? The case attracted national attention, particularly after Netflix released a documentary series about Gabriel's life and death in 2020. The series, titled The Trials of Gabriel Fernandez, examined not just the abuse itself but the systemic failures that enabled it. It forced viewers to confront uncomfortable questions about how society protects its most vulnerable members, and what happens when those protections fail. The documentary sparked outrage and grief across the country. People who had never heard of Gabriel Fernandez suddenly knew his name, knew his story, knew the details of his suffering. They saw his school photos, his bright smile in the years before Pearl took him back. They saw what he looked like in the months before his death. The light gone from his eyes, his body broken and bruised. They saw the transformation from a happy child to a tortured victim, and they demanded to know how this could have happened. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of Gabriel's story is how common it is. Every year, hundreds of children die from abuse and neglect in the United States. Many of them, like Gabriel, were known to Child Protective Services. Many of them had been reported multiple times. Many of them were failed by the very systems that were supposed to save them. Gabriel's case became famous because of its extreme brutality and because of the documentary, but he was not unique. He was simply one of many. Gabriel's siblings, who witnessed his torture, were removed from the home after his death and placed in foster care. They carried the psychological scars of what they saw, what they were forced to participate in, what they could not stop. They lost their brother. They lost their childhood. They lost any sense of safety or normalcy. The trauma they experienced will affect them for the rest of their lives. Gabriel's grandparents, who had raised him during his early years, were devastated by his death. They had tried to keep him, had wanted to continue caring for him, but Pearl had insisted on taking him back. They blamed themselves for not fighting harder, for not doing more to protect him. They carried the weight of his loss every day, knowing that he was safe with them and that returning him to Pearl was a death sentence. The teachers and school staff who reported Gabriel's abuse also carry guilt. They did everything they were supposed to do. They followed the proper channels. They made the required reports, and it was not enough. They watched Gabriel deteriorate before their eyes, and they were powerless to stop it. Some of them left the teaching profession after his death, unable to continue working in a system that had failed so completely. The question that haunts everyone connected to this case is simple and impossible to answer. How did this happen? How did an 8-year-old boy get tortured to death while multiple people were actively trying to save him? How did the system fail so completely and so repeatedly? How did Pearl and Isauro get away with their crimes for so long? The answer is complex and uncomfortable. It involves overworked social workers carrying impossible caseloads. It involves a culture within Child Protective Services that prioritizes keeping families together over protecting children. It involves implicit biases that make social workers more likely to believe parents over teachers or other reporters. It involves a legal system that makes it difficult to remove children from homes without overwhelming evidence of abuse. It involves budget cuts and staff shortages and bureaucratic indifference. But it also involves something more fundamental. It involves a society that does not value its most vulnerable members enough to properly fund and staff the agencies responsible for protecting them. It involves a collective willingness to look away from uncomfortable truths, to believe that abuse happens to other people's children, in other neighborhoods, in other communities. It involves a failure of empathy and imagination, an inability to truly grasp the suffering of children we do not know. Gabriel Fernandez died because two people tortured him. But he also died because a system failed him, and because a society allowed that system to fail. His death is a collective responsibility, a shared shame that should haunt everyone who believes that children deserve protection and safety. If you had been Gabriel's neighbor, would you have called the police when you heard him screaming? Or would you have turned up the television and told yourself it was none of your business? The legacy of Gabriel Fernandez is complicated. His death led to reforms, to increased awareness, to changes in how child abuse cases are handled. But it also revealed the limits of those reforms, the difficulty of truly protecting children in a system that is fundamentally broken. Laws can be passed. Policies can be changed. Training can be improved. But none of it matters if the people responsible for implementing those changes do not have the resources, the support, and the will to do so effectively. Gabriel's story is not just about child abuse. It is about power and powerlessness, about who society chooses to protect and who it chooses to abandon. It is about the invisible children who suffer in silence, whose pain is ignored or dismissed or explained away. It is about the adults who see that suffering and choose to do nothing, or who try to do something and are thwarted by bureaucracy and indifference. Gabriel Fernandez should be alive today. He should be 20 years old, starting his adult life, pursuing his dreams, building his future. Instead, he is dead, tortured to death by the people who were supposed to love him, failed by the system that was supposed to protect him. His life was stolen from him, day by day, beating by beating, until there was nothing left. The cabinet where Gabriel was forced to sleep still exists somewhere, probably in an evidence locker. The apartment where he was tortured has new tenants now, people who may not know what happened within those walls. The school where he tried to find safety continues to educate children, though the teachers who knew Gabriel will never forget him. Life goes on for everyone except Gabriel. Pearl Fernandez sits in prison, where she will remain until she dies. She has given interviews in which she expresses remorse, claims she did not mean for Gabriel to die, insists she loved him. But her words ring hollow. Love does not torture. Love does not destroy. Love does not force a child to eat cat litter and sleep in a cabinet and endure pain that no human being should ever experience. Whatever Pearl felt for Gabriel, it was not love. Isauro Aguirre sits on death row, awaiting an execution that may never come. California has a moratorium on the death penalty, which means he will likely die of old age before the state kills him. He has shown no remorse. He has not apologized. He has not explained why he targeted Gabriel, why he took such pleasure in torturing a defenseless child. Perhaps there is no explanation. Perhaps some people are simply capable of monstrous acts, and no amount of analysis or understanding can change that fact. The social workers who closed Gabriel's cases have moved on with their lives. Some still work in child protective services. Some have left the field. They were not convicted of any crimes and they face no ongoing legal consequences for their failures. They made mistakes, catastrophic mistakes, but mistakes are not always crimes. They have to live with the knowledge that Gabriel died because they did not do enough, did not look closely enough, did not fight hard enough. That may be punishment enough, or it may not be punishment at all. What would you do if you discovered that your inaction had contributed to a child's death? Could you forgive yourself? Should you? Gabriel's case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about child abuse and the systems designed to prevent it. We want to believe that children are protected, that there are safeguards in place, that tragedies like Gabriel's death are rare anomalies. But the reality is more disturbing. Child abuse is common. The systems designed to prevent it are underfunded and overwhelmed. Children fall through the cracks every day. Some of them die. Most of them survive but carry the scars of their abuse for the rest of their lives. The psychological impact of prolonged child abuse is devastating and permanent. Children who are tortured, like Gabriel was, experience trauma that rewires their brains. They develop complex PTSD, attachment disorders, depression, anxiety, and a host of other mental health issues. They struggle to form healthy relationships. They have difficulty trusting others. They often repeat the patterns of abuse they experienced, either by becoming abusers themselves or by seeking out abusive relationships. The cycle continues generation after generation unless it is interrupted by intervention and treatment. Gabriel never had the chance to heal from his trauma. He never had the opportunity to grow up, to overcome what was done to him, to build a life beyond the abuse. His potential was destroyed along with his body. We will never know what he might have become, what he might have accomplished, what he might have contributed to the world. All of that was stolen from him. The question that remains, the question that should keep us awake at night, is this: how many other Gabriels are out there right now? How many children are being tortured in their homes while neighbors hear screams and do nothing? How many children are going to school with bruises and burns while teachers make reports that go nowhere? How many children are dying slowly, painfully, while the systems designed to protect them fail again and again? Gabriel Fernandez's death was not inevitable, it was preventable. Multiple people tried to prevent it. They made reports. They raised alarms. They did what they were supposed to do. And it was not enough. The system failed. The system always fails someone. The question is whether we, as a society, care enough to fix it, or whether we will simply wait for the next Gabriel to die and then express our shock and outrage all over again. Gabriel's story does not have a happy ending. There is no redemption, no silver lining, no comfort to be found. A child was tortured to death. The people who tortured him are in prison. The people who failed to save him faced minimal consequences. The system that enabled his death continues to operate, slightly reformed but fundamentally unchanged. And somewhere right now, another child is suffering, waiting for someone to save them, hoping that this time the system will not fail. Will it be you who makes the call that saves them? Or will you be another person who saw something, suspected something, and chose to look away?